Yeah, there we go. Can everybody see it?
Yes.
You can see it? Good. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Harrison Canning, and my project is called We Are Neurotech, which I will explain a little bit more about in a bit. So first, I want to give some background. Neurotechnology is technology that works with the brain, either stimulates the brain or records from the brain for a specific either medical or consumer commercial purpose. So the definition is a technology that records, stimulates, or works with the brain and nervous system to influence how researchers understand the brain and consciousness, supplement, engage, or monitor the nervous system, or allow a user to influence the functioning of a machine from brain function. So just for some examples, this is a prosthetic arm where it's actually getting input from the electrical signals coming from the brain, from the nerves in the spinal cord. He's actually able to feel through this prosthetic as well, but he's controlling that just as he would control his own hand. This is another set of two prosthetic arms. This person here, the subject, is partially paralyzed, and he's able to think from a implant in his brain to control these two arms to cut a piece of bread and feed himself. And this is an exosuit controlled by brain signals to help this gentleman walk around. He's also paralyzed from the waist down. And then as a final example, this is a typing interface using a non-invasive neurotechnology. So it's recording signals from her brain that help the machine type. You can see that there's pretty good accuracy. She's typing over there. BCI stands for brain computer interface. So there's a wide breadth of technologies that come out of this. So I just showed examples where they're using brain signals to control an object, but this is also used widely in the medical field for a whole host of different things, for mental health disorders, for helping with Parkinson's, chronic pain. There's a whole wide array of technologies that are out there. And so the field is really, really diverse in thought and is really multidisciplinary. And you have researchers that have been in the field for decades upon decades, entrepreneurs coming in, starting new companies, and a lot of students rushing into the space as it starts to grow. And so I really wanted to represent this diversity of thought that's coming into the field, from the differences between a researcher who's been running a lab for 40 years versus a student that's coming in with new ideas about what the technology can be. And so I wanted to create a video project that showcases all of these different ideas and backgrounds that people have and come to the table with. And so the original concept was to kind of make it like a Zoom call, like we're on, but where every tile is a short video response to some basic questions that everyone is able to answer. And so and put that on a website. So that is the concept. And so I interviewed CEOs, researchers, students, and enthusiasts for this. And like I said, organized each page by a specific question. So in terms of what has been delivered, so I did all of the branding, the logo development, the website development, made branding guidelines. I did 29 short form interviews. So every video clip that you see here, I spoke with someone over Zoom, and we just had like a normal conversation. Then I chopped that up into individual videos, edited those, added in some nameplates. I also did 5 long form interviews. So those are over an hour with specific individuals that are showcased at the end. So this resulted in 118 final videos edited and produced, and the website is developed and live, where we'll go right now. So if you want to take a look at it too, you can go to We Are Neurotech, Neuro tech.com. So it'll take a second to load here because I need to get a new host. It's a little bit slow, but so this is the main web page. I'll just read this part here. So the We Are Neurotech project is a collection of video responses from neurotechnologists of all backgrounds to some basic questions designed to show diversity of thought in the field. This project sheds light onto the many possibilities of this new class of revolutionary technologies. Responses are collected from researchers, entrepreneurs, executives, students, and enthusiasts that represent a wide variety of perspectives. And this project is maintained by a company that I have that makes educational media around neurotechnology. So there are 10 questions. I will go through a couple responses to them, but the questions are, and these questions are designed to be answerable by everyone, kind of regardless of how long they've been in the fields, because they're pretty open-ended. So what do you do in neurotech? How did you get into the neurotech field? What do you wish you knew when you were first getting started? What is the most exciting future application? What is the most exciting current application? What are the biggest challenges facing neurotech? What would it take for you to use a neurotech device every day? Because obviously all of us right now are not wearing a brain headset, and that's true for people working in the industry too. So what would it need to do to change that? Favorite sci-fi media? What scares you the most about neurotechnologies? So getting into some ethics, and then a philosophy question of what is your definition of a cyborg, and are we cyborgs already? So we can click through these here. Am I able to share sound as well? Probably. Well, I think I probably had to do that in the beginning, but that's okay. So this is what each web page looks like. So it kind of looks like a Zoom call. It was adapted a little bit for the program that I was using to build out the website, but each of these is a playable video. Can you hear that or no?
No. It was muffled and too fast.
Okay. So anyway, each of these are little videos. So this is from the CEO and founder of G-Tech Medical, which is one of the larger clinical neurotechnology providers. We have some students and enthusiasts and stuff as well. I'm gonna see if I'm gonna stop the share for just 1 second and then share the sound. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So yeah, I'll just play a little bit of each of these.
Research,
so you can hear that.
in the makerspace and also in the medical field to treat patients or to diagnose patients. Yeah,
He's a bit of a soft talker. Let's go to the next one. So yeah, they take a little bit to load. I'm working on that, but yeah, each of one of these is an edited video from someone in the field.
Would it be easy for you to share some response to the cyborg, the final question, the cyborg question?
Are you interested in the cyborg one? Sure. I'm going to do here. I'll do future applications and then I'll do the cyborg one. Yes. How are we on time right now?
It's 4:09, so you've got another 6 minutes.
We're doing 10 minutes? Okay.
You've got 6 minutes. Okay,
sounds good. All right, I will just do your cyborg question then, if you're interested in that. But this one we only have 4 responses, unfortunately, but I think Sharina gave an interesting response to that. So,
in my mind, a cyborg is part human, part device. And I think that we have been cyborgs as a species ever since we started using tools. And yes, birds that use tools, they're also cyborgs. Monkeys that use tools are also cyborgs. There becomes a gradient, though, of, okay, how intelligent are the tools that we use? And when the tools become intelligent, where they have some sort of system that takes in data and uses the data and gives the feedback to the user, that is when a person really becomes a cyborg. All
right, so I'm going to cut it off there so I can get back to the presentation. But this was a really interesting question because people have ideas from a cyborg is a mechatronic, like Hollywood-inspired image, where like half the Terminator, right? Like half the face is a robot. And then other people like Sharina are on the far other extreme, where anytime that we're adapting something into our brain body model, that becomes a part of you, and in a sense you become a cyborg. So yeah, that's the main project. There are also the long form interviews, like I said, and I made a form so that people can submit their own videos without me having to sit down and do the interview with them, although that was very fun. But I'd like to keep this going as a project and get more responses. So I'm just going to go over a little bit of data from 3 of the questions because I thought they were interesting. So in terms of people that I interviewed, in this first set, it was 7 executives, so CEOs and other executives. There were 4 researchers, 11 students, and 7 enthusiasts. So the enthusiasts were running chapters of a nonprofit called Neurotech X. They put on these events for neurotechnologists, and they were the leaders of those groups. What is the most exciting future application of neurotechnology in your opinion? So everything could be broken down into these 6 categories. So 7 people said that communication, direct brain-to-brain communication, was the most exciting. 9 were interested in the medical benefits. 2, mental health, that's also medical, but I just wanted to separate it out a little bit. 5 for gaming and entertainment, being able to enter into a video game and control the character with just your mind, that sort of a thing, feel what the character is feeling. 4 for productivity purposes, and I spoke to a Spanish architect, he was one of the art ones, that is working on making these billboards that are responsive to emotions and houses that are responsive to emotions, changing physical elements as well as like lights and sounds and stuff in relation to neurotechnology and biofeedback. Then the last one, what is your definition of a cyborg? So 28 responses, and this is very subjective, but I just put this up here based on like the general feelings that people had, because it's definitely a gradient, it's definitely a spectrum, but most people were more on the side of the biomechatronic, like very visible cyborg, although cell phones made it into a lot of people's definition of cyborg, which kind of pulled it this way a little bit, because there were a lot of people that said, anytime we use a cell phone, we're a cyborg. So that was kind of the most common answer on that side. So the takeaways for this project for me was that I gained a lot of connections to industry leaders. It was a really great foot in the door to say, hey, I have this project for school. Can I interview you? Can we talk? And so that's been really helpful. And so that kind of fills my business concentration. My other concentration, neuroscience, I learned more about neurotech and neuroscience from getting the opportunity to talk with and connect with experts. Another concentration that I have is design. And so I designed and branded everything in the project. So that was helpful for that. And then my immersion was in the science and technology ethics immersion. And so I discussed at length technology ethics, like the cyborg theory, and then also there was an ethics question as well. So it was great to have those conversations with people. And so for the next steps for me, I plan on continuing. I have 6 more videos that I want to edit. So each of those so that's another 60 videos that will come out. And so I want to keep making those, get the hosting a little bit faster because of some of those problems that we saw, and then publish it and launch it, and then basically continue to update it. I hope that people will continue to submit videos, that I'll continue to be able to use this as a way to meet people and network. And then I want to do kind of like this, but longer form, where I put some statistics to the general trends that people have in what they're talking about. And so at the end of every year, I'd like to make a video that stitches some of those together, as well as providing my analysis on top of that. But yeah, that's all I got. Thank you.
I think probably without understating it, that's probably enough. So
well, yeah, I'm gonna keep doing it just because I want to publish the project.
I'm being sort of sarcastic, but it was a brilliant presentation. So I have 3 quick questions. I have lots of questions actually, but I'm going to limit it to 3. And one is, we will be able to see this website, right? I mean, you're going to make it.
You can, okay. You can put it in your URL right now. Yep.
Okay, so make sure you put the URL in your product paper. So right at the beginning, you showed those examples of mostly of handicapped or whatever the word is, they can't use their limbs. So they were controlling objects outside of their body. But my question is, what was the feedback? What were they feeling? Were they feeling anything, or was it just like, I know that I'm cutting this piece of bread? Did they get a feel? Do they have a feel for that?
Yeah. So so the feeling is crude right now. It feels like a tingling, and you get like very like general proprioceptive feeling. But basically what they're doing is, in this example, so you have nerves that come out from the brain out through the spinal cord and connect to your muscles, right? And so they find those nerves and they physically connect the electronics to the nerves that would be controlling finger muscles. And so that's how they're doing this here. And so you can find the same nerves that would be bringing somatosensory, touch and proprioceptive information, somatosensory information up to the brain in this example. And then in this one, you can't really see it, unfortunately, because it's just out of frame, but there's actually a brain implant that goes over his motor cortex. So that's controlling the arm. And then there's one over his somatosensory cortex as well, which is the area that gives us our sense of touch. And so by stimulating that with electricity, you can get a general feel. Now it's much more crude than ours, but you could like feel that you're grasping something. So you can feel that he's holding the fork. Without that ability, it's very, very hard to use these prosthetics. And some of the earlier prosthetics from the 2000s, you can see that there's a lot of difficulty grabbing objects because you're doing it entirely visually.
So with a CI for deaf people, people who are late deafened, and then they get a CI. So I imagine that they do better with a CI because they can remember what the sound was. So they experience the sound, and they have some sort of memory trace that allows them to interpret the sound perhaps better than somebody who was born deaf. Is that true?
Yes. So it kind of depends, because your brain is more plastic when you're younger. So if you get an implant when you're younger, it's easier for you to be able to interpret those signals, but it absolutely can be done later in life. But if you're saying someone who was born deaf or hard of hearing and gets an implant at 40 versus someone who was hearing and then lost their hearing and gets one at 40, yes, the person who had hearing previously has the neural circuitry better set up to support a cochlear implant.
So same with this guy that we're seeing now. I don't know whether he was born paralyzed, but assuming that he wasn't, that he became paralyzed, and so he knows what it's like to do what he's doing. Mm-hmm. Does he have a better appreciation of in the sense of the sensation or the experience of what he's doing because he remembered it?
Yeah, so this gentleman was in a car crash 5 years prior to this, and had a fracture at the C6 level, so that's right up here. But yes, so the motor cortex, pretty much regardless of whether you have the ability to control your arms or not, is developed fairly similarly in people, whether they can move their bodies or not. And so it would require a lot more training if you had never moved your arms before. I mean, like a baby is, when they first come out, is just kind of practicing moving around and learning that they can do that, but it can be learned. But yes, again, same thing. If you've done it before,
okay,
it's easier.
Different question. So oftentimes, us old people, we look at the younger generation, such as yourself, and we think, wow, I just can't keep up with that. So, but you interviewed people who you said have been in the field for 40 years.
Sure.
Do you have a sense that, how do they feel about people like yourself? Are they keeping up? Or no, let me rephrase that. There's got to be all sorts of cutting edge phenomena, right? I mean, it's moving forward in this direction or this direction, whatever. Yeah. Are older people doing that as much as younger people still?
What do you mean this direct, like in terms of?
Well, going back to the way I put that originally. So, when you're older, again, I guess it's plasticity again, but you look at the people who are much younger and you think, there's no way I could do that. I mean, I couldn't do that then, and I certainly can't do it now. But I'm wondering, in this field of neuroscience, are the people who were the leaders 40 years ago, are they still the leaders, or have they given the field over to people like yourself?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a scope thing, right? So talking to a researcher that's been in the field that's like been running their lab for 30, 40 years, they are hyper focused on one thing. So like they might be really, really focused on a vertical microelectrode array, which is just like it's like a shank that goes in the brain with a bunch of electrodes on it. And they are hyper focused on improving this one thing. And you ask them about the future and they're like, maybe we can go from 500 electrodes to 5,000 electrodes. And that's their vision of the future. Whereas if you ask a student that's coming in, they're like, oh, we're going to be gaming in the metaverse with just our brains. We're feeling everything and like all of that. And so it's a very, very different like scoping. But of course, in terms of like people that have been working on the microelectrode array for years, like that's where the small increments of innovation come in that make this larger thing. So it's reliant on both. It's reliant on building the individual components and then also having the vision to put that to use. And you see a lot of companies taking these other technologies that are being developed by the older people and now like making a product out of it. And so there's interplay.
So good answer. So I have another question, which I'm not going to ask you to answer, but I would be interested to hear what you say. Perhaps you can put it in your product paper, what the connection is to this sort of work to the development of artificial intelligence. But don't answer that now. So
yeah, that'd be a long answer.
I'm going to hand over to Meg now.
Sure. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, Stephen, I was about to cut you off. So Harrison, I was eagerly awaiting your presentation because, you know, really up until this point in your life, your young life, this has been your life's work, right? And so I was curious to see, you know, how you were going to come up with something really robust for the Capstone presentation. And I think that you did a really nice job. It's mobile ready, so I was able to check out your website on my phone. So I think
I'm not good on mobile, but
well, it was okay. But I guess my question is, what's the next step for you? So that's one piece, and then the other piece is kind of to piggyback on what Stephen was saying. Do you eventually see yourself settling into a specific area where you can really drill down? Similar to what you're talking about with those 40-year researchers.
Absolutely not. And I wouldn't want to, but I'm a soy student. That's not going to change, but yeah, so just small thing, get that out of the way. I'm changing the hosting for the videos so they will work on mobile, but that's a different thing. It doesn't matter. So in terms of next steps, so I'm working on the BCI guys thing, which is small right now, but the doors that it's opened already is huge. So the BCI guys thing for everyone is where we produce videos that are hopefully entertaining and educational in neurotechnology, and we're kind of the only ones doing that right now. We have a couple sponsorships that have come through the door, some larger projects that we're working on that are bringing in some revenue, although it's small right now. So that's one thing that we're working on. And when I say we, I mean with my business partner, Colin, who I've worked with since 2018 when we started a lab at RIT. And another thing that we're working on right now that's going to kind of be our main thing, we've been working on it for a little over a year, is we're building an aggregative research environment. So it's a tool for researchers to collaborate, store data safely in the cloud, and it integrates a bunch of productivity tools as well. So the idea is like they can upload their own software and use it in this cloud interface. So it keeps everything secure, makes it shareable. So those are kind of our two main things. We have been talking to investors and are preparing for to get some angel funding within the first 6 months, and then ideally keep going with that. So that's the ideal. But if that doesn't work out, I'd look at a product management position. I had a couple offers to do that a year ago, and I declined them, but I think I could reopen that door if I wanted to. I also just last week was offered a job at a lab over at U of R, which I might do part-time to learn more about the research process. But yeah, so those are those things. And then in terms of settling down, I don't ever want to. I want to be doing the entrepreneurship thing where I can wear multiple hats. And if I did like go the research route, I'd want to change that up and go industry next and jump from thing to thing. So I want to keep it all over the place and a little chaotic, but fun. It's better that way. So
that sounds like soy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great.
In the right place.
Thank you so much.
Thank
we
you.
can't, I'm sure other people have questions, but we're going to have to move on. And so I'm going to hand over the share function to Diane. If you would take it away, Diane. Thanks again, Harrison.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is my project, and it was looking at access that the deaf have to language in the church. So first, I wanted to kind of look into the history of, you know, interpreting in the church and so forth, and how deaf people are viewed in the church. And I had a little bit of a struggle just trying to get information, just because oftentimes, especially with the deaf community, it's not documented very well. So it's very difficult to figure out that route. And also with this, I also did some interviews with interpreters and the deaf community. I was initially going to do a survey for the priests, but I couldn't come up with certain questions that I really thought would be the best way to approach that. So, but here's some of the history. So before the Christian era, the deaf was viewed more as like they were cursed or monsters. They were often put to death, and they were often thought they couldn't be, you know, educated because they couldn't hear the word of God. So with that, you know, it was kind of like they didn't want to put any effort into that, because oftentimes with a disability like deafness, along with other disabilities that were around in the past, they, you know, nobody wanted to really deal with it. So they decided to go the route of shunning them more often than not. So going on, I primarily looked at how they're included in the Syracuse diocese and other things as well. So they've had Mass provided since about 1950 in the Syracuse diocese. And in around 2000 to 2002, I wasn't able to get any more in-depth information. They had some big celebration to do with the deaf community and in the church. They also provide deaf ministry. So they have a deaf mass every single year that's put on. So they have usually a deaf priest comes in to do and say mass for the deaf community. With that kind of delves into the first deaf priest, which is Father Thomas Coughlin. And he's the only one that's been born deaf that we know of so far that has been ordained a priest, and he was ordained in 1977. And he's done several of the interpreted masses in the Syracuse area. And I'm not sure exactly where he's out of. I was trying to get a little bit more information, but I couldn't pinpoint that as of yet. I'm going to do more research on to figure out where he's actually out of. However, I did find out there are about 7 to 8 deaf Catholic priests in the United States as a whole. And, you know, the deaf are included quite often with interpreters, but they generally have to be, you know, the priest needs to know that there's a deaf person in their congregation in order for them to provide them with an interpreter in terms of that. So going from there, I'm going to now go into my surveys that I sent out. And first, I want to talk about the interpreter's perspectives and what I found with that. So there is positives and negatives within my questions. So I've had, for their questions, I've had like, what made you interested? The best and worst parts that they felt were of interpreting at a mass, What were their hurdles if they encountered anyone, especially if it's with a priest? How has it benefited them? And basically, has it helped them grow their faith in any sort of way? So the positives I found, because I heard back from 3 interpreters, and most felt that the reason they were in, they decided to get into religious interpreting was because they found that there was a need and they wanted to provide that for the deaf community. And so there's definitely a need for qualified interpreters. Most of the time there's been open communication with the choir director and getting the music for that. They do benefit spiritually from, interpreting. However, most of them said it's usually when they're going to mass that they deepen their faith, not necessarily interpreting for a mass. A positive was getting to know the deaf community, and seeing the quality of those they serve. Again, providing equal access to them. And also oftentimes the reason they are doing interpreting in the religious science, sometimes just to keep so they don't lose any of their, skills. The negative portions that were found was oftentimes they're in like dead spots or not fairly positioned well, or they're not given microphones. Finding the coordinator before mass has been a challenge sometimes. They found that there's no labeled seating for those who need an interpreter. So if somebody comes into the church and they don't know that it's an interpreter before them, but there's an interpreter there, they don't know where to go in terms of seating, in terms of that. I know in certain churches they have designated in the front section, but it's definitely not labeled unless you know that before going in there. Again, the placement of interpreters is poor. They're usually like in front of like the ambo, which is the lectern, and kind of off to the side generally. So it's kind of like they're a part of the mass, but it's not very well situated. And I can understand placement is very difficult in a church to figure out where the interpreter needs to be placed in terms of visibility most of the time. There's also need for more advertising. They said that oftentimes it's not advertised that there's like interpreted masses, and oftentimes some priests don't know who the deaf are and they don't socialize with them. Now for the deaf community, I got feedback from 2 members of the community, and again, positive and negative results. Positive is that they are able to attend, physically. Some of the questions that I asked was, how has it impacted them having an interpreted mass? Again, best and worst, having interpreters. If their faith has grown, why is an interpreter important for them? And is it easy to request an interpreter, and what's maybe lacking, if anything? So positivities for them, it enriches the mass. They can feel that they can fully attend with their family members and not feel excluded. They definitely get more out of it because they're getting provided with the information of the mass. So their faith is definitely growing. They benefit more from the homilies, and it gets them to think and gives them food for thought. Whereas if they don't have access to that, then they don't know what's going on and don't necessarily get that type of reflection that everybody else does. And they can feel like a full participant. Some negative things is, in the past, it was very difficult to request an interpreter. And out in rural areas, it's difficult because oftentimes the interpreters are traveling like 1.5 to 2 hours to get out there. And if the interpreter can't get there, then there's no interpreter for that weekend. in terms of that. They get little out of mass if there's no interpreter at all. They may know the routine, but doesn't really know the homily. And that most of the time in a Catholic church, yes, you're there for the mass, but oftentimes the homily is the main point, which is what the priest is teaching on, and he's talking about the readings for that week. And they don't necessarily get that when there is an interpreter. And again, where they, along with the interpreters, say that where the interpreter is situated for them, they don't feel like they're fully engaged or worthy of being there, just because they're oftentimes off to the side with that. So my findings, overall, there was a few differences with that, but the main things was most found that having interpreters at mass benefits them. The main complaint that they've had is the placement of interpreters, not enough advertising for when there's going to be an interpreted mass. And there needs to be better communication with the coordinator of service when they get there, because oftentimes they don't really know where to go to find like music stands and so forth like that. And oftentimes there needs to be more education of priests and deacons. That you've run into issues with just priests not understanding the role of the interpreter. And one of the interpreters that I got feedback from, she had encountered with a deacon when they were doing videoing for the televised mass and saying, why are we paying for an interpreter? We can just do captioning. Captioning is not everything. And there's benefits to captioning and interpreting, but however, if you're going to be televised, having the interpreter on screen is more beneficial than the captioning itself.
Diane, can you begin to summarize? Can you begin to wrap it up? Oh.
Yeah,
Good
I was
timing.
just about there. I was just about there. So, yeah, so I found it interesting that, that most found that there's a benefit for having interpreters, and the main complaints are just lack of education or placement of where they're supposed to be during the mass.
I have a couple of, thank you very much. That was very interesting. I have a couple of related questions, I guess. The first one is the demographics of deaf people in the religious dimension of religion. Do you have any sense of, how many deaf people are Catholic and how many deaf people are agnostic and whatever?
I haven't really gotten the whole sense of that numbering, although I can look into that a little bit more. I was mainly focusing on I know for the Catholic Church, a lot of them are older. It's an older demographic from what I've encountered, at least in the Syracuse diocese. From the deaf masses that I've attended or have gone to an interpreted mass, it's mostly an older demographic for that.
So it may be, and this is my second question, it may be a question of demand. Maybe there just isn't enough demand. Maybe there's just not enough people who would benefit from the service. But in the sign language department at NTAD, they have recently developed. I'm not sure whether they're minors. They may even be majors at this. Maybe it's at the graduate level in interpreting for medicine and interpreting for the legal profession. And I'm wondering if there's ever been any call or thought about interpreting for religious purposes. Do you know that?
Religious services, there's definitely a need for that. However, I've noticed with a lot of interpreters, at least the ones that I've come in contact with, certain ones just don't want to get into the religious interpreting for either their personal beliefs or the fact they think it's difficult to some degree, which really interpreting a Catholic Mass is not as difficult as it seems, because you're given all the materials. If you reach out and get the contact for the Mass, you can get all the resources you need in terms of.
You're frozen. Is it my computer or is everybody having the same experience?
No, she's lagging a bit here.
You there, Diane? Oh,
Yeah, here.
you,
Is that better?
I saw you move.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's on the end Zoom for me.
That's okay. So I forget what your concentrations are, but if this was a field that you were interested in, and of course not everybody and not every interpreter is interested in interpreting for doctors or for lawyers. So it would be something that people would elect to follow. It might be worth advocating for depending on the demographic, depending on the demand, right? It would have to be. Obviously, there's a big demand for certainly in medicine, but probably also in the legal affairs. But there might also be a call, and there might also be a space here to train people to specifically for religious interpreting. Anyway, that's just a thought.
Yeah, it's definitely a need, and I've been in it. Like, I've actually helped interpret for Mass, so it's definitely a need there to do it. It's just, I think, I don't understand, but certain interpreters have a fear of going into that, just because, again, like, religious and politics are like two things that are very touchy subjects to some degree, and so people tend to stray away from those topics, or even getting into either of those. And
all right, okay. Well, thanks very much. I really enjoyed your presentation. Meg?
Yeah, thank you. So Diane, I thought that was really interesting. My question is, so you've identified a need for interpreters in Catholic Mass. I guess my question is, how receptive, through your interviews and through your research, how receptive do you think the Catholic religion is to integrating this? Is it a matter of funding? Is it, I'm not Catholic, but I don't know if you have thoughts on is it a culture of acceptance? And is this something that they would work hard to integrate? And then my other question is, do you have any sense for other religions and whether or not interpreters are a more active participant in whatever rituals they might have?
well, I know for a fact that they do have, Catholics do have a deaf liaison set up. So somebody in charge of all the interpreters for the diocese in Syracuse, and I'm pretty sure other dioceses as well. So the interpreters are already established, but they have certain ones for different, that they know are going to different areas and so forth. The problem we have is if one of those interpreters is gone, we don't necessarily have somebody to replace them in terms of, getting somebody to fill in if somebody can't do a Mass a particular weekend. And that's
so it's not a situation where you're bringing in someone that's freelance that works for an interpreting company and they might be assigned to Mass one day. This is one person that's situated within a specific parish and they stay.
Yeah, typically there's a few that move around and will work at like maybe 2 or 3 different churches doing a Mass at, depending on the weekend. So they do move around a little bit. There's ones that are, if it's more rural area, there's more ones designated to that area because there's not enough for that. And as for other denominations, I've seen there's a need, but I think they still have the same issues as Catholics in terms of getting people to fill the shoes. If an interpreter is sick or, is on vacation or things like that, getting them to replace the interpreter for that weekend is very, very difficult.
Right. Okay. Well, that was really interesting. I enjoyed the information. Thank you very much.
So let's go to Misty. You're up, Misty.
Wait. All right. All right. So my name's Misty, and I did my capstone project on Nameless Adventures, which is a board game I've been working on since May of this year. So during that time, I was working on it pretty much on and off. My main focus at that time was focusing on the art and design of the board game, but not actually like the rules and how to balance the game for people to enjoy it. So for this capstone specifically, I focused a lot on developing the rules, getting feedback from people outside of my friend group, and learning about the board game industry as a whole. Right, so will you be part of the venture? So to give background on my game, it's a semi-cooperative board game where a group of nameless adventurers band together to defeat the greedy boss who owns all the treasure and land in this kingdom. So one player plays as the boss, and the other players in the game, so either 2 or 3 players, plays as adventurers. And it usually takes about like 30 minutes to an hour to complete. And it's ranged about ages 10 and up. So for the boss to win, they have to defeat all the adventurers, and for the adventurers to win, they have to defeat the boss. So I achieved a lot of my goals during this process. So I got a lot of feedback from people outside my friend group. I was actually talking to my coworker about my board game, and he was like, "Oh, I have a teacher that's really into board games. You should send him an email." So I was like, "Okay, sure." So I got in contact with Garrett, who is part of iSchool, and I sent him an email. I'm like, "My coworker told me to email you because you like board games. Do you want to meet up?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." So I met up with him, and he's actually a board game designer himself. He's been working on a board game for the past 2 years. And he gave me like a bunch of resources about the whole board game industry as a whole, since he's been a huge part of it. And he also introduced me to Crash Test Club, and he's like, "You should definitely go here to get a bunch of like feedback and playtest your board game." So Crash Test is a club in RIT where the whole premise of it's usually for game design majors. So game design offers courses in board game design, and people would bring their games there for other people to play test and to give advice on. So ever since then, I've been going about like every single Monday. And during this time, I also went to Gen Con this year, which is the largest board game convention in all of North America. I learned a lot being there. And during this whole process, I posted all my art and everything I developed for the game on Instagram and Twitter, and I started gaining a pretty small following, but it's something. So after I finished a playtest, I would give people a survey link to fill out, and the questions would be like on a scale of 1 to 10. How would you rate like this game? Do you like the gameplay? How do you feel about the art? And the one question I wanted to focus specifically on was so now that you played the game, what gameplay changes to the game would you make? What do you like and dislike? And from the playtest, I picked 1 to 2 mechanics to change. Then I would implement the changes, and then I would play the game again and see how that would affect how fun and interactive the game was with other people. So when I first presented my capstone proposal back in August 26, 2021, I told Steven that most of the gameplay is done. I was like really off from that. Apparently it was so far from being done because the only people at this point that played my board game were my friends. And like I feel like they like kind of are like, "Oh yeah, your game's good, like it's complete." But when you get like random people that like don't know you, they're definitely harsh and they give you a lot more constructive criticism. And it was great because like they would suggest things like that I wouldn't have ever thought about. So I got a lot of feedback from these like random people. And so a lot of the struggle was balancing the dynamic between the boss and the adventures. So through my data, I realized that the ventures would win almost all the time. So I've been tweaking the rules around to give the boss more buffs and just changing the rules for them to actually have a higher advantage, just so they don't lose every single time. I also had to work around with the individual characters and seeing how, if you play this character, is it fun? Does this character always win? So each character has a different statistic for attack, defense, range, and speed. They have their different abilities. And it's also like a hard time balancing them, because it's like, I want this character to have a different play strategy than another without making this character better than like another one. So I did numerous changes throughout this whole game. I've changed like the map tiles twice. I've reworked the whole deck of cards like 3 to 4 times. And I ended up changing the whole combat system too. And it's definitely a lot more balanced now. It's not complete, but I'm definitely happier with how the game is than it was back in August. So Garen and his friends created like this board game company called Cosmic Dice Games. And he's given me like a lot of resources. So one of the resources is Joe Slack's free game design course. So Joe Slack created a board game called Crazy Like a Box, and he published it on Kickstarter, and it became really popular. So I guess he wanted to give back, and he created this game design course that goes all the way from the beginning, from so you have a game idea, how do you progress with it? So it's like, you have a game idea, you need play tests, then you'll get prototypes, and it's like everywhere from marketing to actually producing the game. And it's like a free resource that anyone can use. He also introduced me to print play games. So this site is where you can upload your designs of your board game as is, and you can get professionally printed copies of your board game. He's also told me about Board Game Geeks, and I've already knew of this one. It's kind of like the Wikipedia or Yelp of board games, but he actually uses it as a marketing strategy, which I thought was really cool. So the idea of a print and play is that you have a PDF of your board game, and you can upload a PDF of your rules too. And people will print out your board game and the components, they will cut it up, and then they will play your board game without having to actually buy the game themselves. So he's like put up his board game that he's been working on for the past 2 years, and some people have like downloaded the rules. And this is a way where you can start gaining like a small following and getting feedback from like people all over the world, which is really cool. So the one that was really interesting to me that he told me about is the Game Crafter. It's similar to print and play games, where it's a print on demand website. So you upload your designs, you get a product. But it has a feature called crowd sale, which is a crowdfunding resource that's really cool. So right now in the board game industry, the two, or I guess the three main ways to publish a board game is, one, find a publisher. You gotta like pitch your idea to a board game publisher, and if they like it, they'll buy it and then they'll sell it. The other way is manufacturing and selling the game yourself. However, that's a really expensive route, because you basically have to buy your game in like thousands, and it's a lot of money up front. If your game doesn't do well, you're basically stuck with 1,000 copies of your game that no one wants. And the third most popular option that a lot of people that are going into the board game industry go for is Kickstarter, which is a crowdfunding resource where you put your product online and people will pay money for your product. And you have a certain amount of time for your campaign that you set, and if you reach the goal, you have to deliver the product to the people who backed it. But the struggle with that is that you have to do everything yourself. You have to do the manufacturing and the shipping, unless you pay someone else to do it. But the Game Crafter is really cool with the crowd sale, is that instead of manufacturing and printing everything yourself and shipping everything yourself, they do it for you. So on crowd sale, the more people that buy your game during the time frame of when you set your campaign to be, the less expensive your game will be. So if you buy something in bulk, it's going to be cheaper, which is great for you because people want to buy your games, and it's great for them because they're getting a product for a cheaper value. So I went to Gen Con, which is the largest board game convention in North America. I went here in September. And it was really cool to, oh.
You're frozen, Misty. Oh,
Oh, there it goes. Okay. So I got to see how people promoted their games and art. And there's a bunch of events that goes on from every hour of the day. And there's like tables to try out games. So what people would do is that when they're selling a board game, they would have a table out for you, and they'll have like everything set up, and you would just walk up, come sit down, and they'll explain the rules, and you would get to try out the game, and they're like, now you want to play it. So it's just a great way to sell and market your game. And over there, I've networked with a couple of people. I met with the creator of Anomnia, which is a award winning board game. And I told him I was developing a board game myself. So he gave me his business card, and he's like, you know, if you ever need help with anything or have questions, like send me an email. Because when he was making his first board game, he got a lot of help, and he wanted to pay it forward. Because he actually started as a musician, and now he's sold like his board game and a bunch of expansions to his board game, which is really cool. So everything I do, I post on.
Misty, can you begin to wrap it up? Because we're hitting 5 o'clock.
All right. So everything I've done, I posted on Instagram and Twitter. So I post all my artwork, playtests, and game development. And on there, I follow other board game developers, and I've gotten like a pretty kind of large or small following. I mean, I started with like 4 people that were like the people I knew from RIT that actually had social media, because none of my friends use social media, and I now have like over 100 followers, and a lot of them are YouTubers that either review board games or game designers, or just random other people that are like, yeah, this is cool. So although I didn't actually finish the board game, I learned to use feedback and criticism to make my game a lot better. I wasn't always like this. So back in the past, if someone would give me like criticism that I didn't like, I would like take it as a personal attack rather than use it as like a positive thing. So I've definitely learned a lot from them, because like criticism is like the best thing you can have to make yourself and the product you're trying to deliver better. I've also got involved with like extracurricular activities. I wasn't involved with RIT beforehand. I just like went home and played video games. But now I'm on Mondays I go to Crash Test, and on Fridays I go with Garrett's group to Robert's Wesley, and we play board games together. And throughout this whole process, I made a bunch of new friends. So yeah, any questions or comments?
Meg, do you want to go first?
I would love to. So, so Misty, wow, I think this is fantastic. And I guess one question is, so have you had this professionally printed, you know, however it exists, in whatever state it's in? And is it going to be something that you can set up for this symposium at cost?
So I don't have it professionally printed, but I have my own prototypes that I made myself. So I have like all the game pieces.
Okay.
My camera's kind of bad. But like this is a prototype I've been going for. And the only reason why I don't have it professionally printed right now is because the rules are changing so rapidly. That if I printed it out, I would have to redo everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Because about like every week I go back and rechange the art to update what the new rules are. So like so until I think the game's like close to completion, I don't plan on getting professional prints.
Right. Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. I was just going to say, if this is something you did professionally print, obviously we would want to financially, you know, contribute to that if you wanted to do that. So a couple comments I would make is, I love the outcomes that you shared with us. And I think that is really remarkable. One, being receptive to feedback is something that is not natural to very many people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is, you know, recognizing the value of it and being receptive to authentic feedback is really fantastic. I also think the fact that you've, through this project, and this is a passion project of yours anyway, so
Yeah.
say that this capstone project is the reason that you've engaged in our IT life, but we would love for that to be true. But I think this one, regardless, is a really fabulous outcome too, because that, you know, it's such an opportunity to be in this ecosystem, and it sounds like you're taking advantage of two different ecosystems by being at RIT and Roberts Wesleyan, you know, to establish your communities. So just really great job. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I like that part too. I mean, it's good to be stretched and to stretch, and it sounds like this project led you in a couple of directions that you weren't quite, you didn't expect. So that's just great. I had a question of, for the symposium. You say, you know, you have your own set and you're updating them all the time. Are you going to, you know, we have this deal where you have the poster, but you can also have a table. So I'm wondering if you're going to lay out your game at the symposium.
Yeah, I plan to actually. I plan on like laying it all out. If someone comes up, I'll like go through the rules really quick.
Great. I like that idea. I will be one of those people. So I had another question. It was interesting that the boss always loses, because that ain't the way it happens.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're looking at that again. Do the 6 adventurers, do they collaborate? Is that the deal? I mean, how do the 6 people who are against the boss, do they work together?
So the adventures, there's actually 2 or 3 of them, depending on how many people play the game. But yeah, they're able to trade cards and give cards to each other. And so cards are like a huge mechanic of the game, because every turn you get new cards until the deck runs out. So you're like actively helping each other try to like not die, while be like, oh yeah, we have to kill this boss, you know?
I was feeling sorry for the boss as soon as you said it was 6 against 1.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm glad you're looking at that. Okay, that was you're obviously very enthusiastic about this project, and we always like to see that. So that's just great. So does anybody else have any questions?
I just want to say, if I can, I love the quote that's like, I'm almost done.
Oh yeah.
I feel that I resonate with that so much on every project, and I'm glad to hear that you're continuing to iterate over it. The artwork is gorgeous. The little footers are really funny. And
Oh, thank you.
let me know when it comes out. I'd love to buy one if you
Thank
end up
you.
selling it. Very cool.
Yeah, and I would just add, Misty, we'd love to, we've made this offer to other students that have created artifacts, but we'd love to have a couple copies of it in the Source Commons. So,
Okay.
you know, be sure to let us know. The other thing I was just going to add is I love this idea that people open source some of their board games, and that you would potentially utilize it as an opportunity to continually improve it, more iterations. So I think that that's really smart. But do let us know if it does end up on something like that, so that we can let students know about it and you know, promote the game more.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Great job.
Yes, 3 great presentations. A couple quick reminders, the Capstone Symposium on December 2nd. You've got 2 other papers too that you need to deliver on, the product paper and the reflection paper, both of which can be submitted to the same folder in the assignments Dropbox in my courses. And we are really excited and look forward to seeing you at the symposium. And fabulous job, and congratulations on wrapping things up. I think for all 3 of you, you're finished in December, is that correct?
Yes.
Kind of.
Maybe?
No, all my credits will be done, but I'm PIing a
Right.
motor imagery study in spring, so I'll still be here.
Okay, you might stay forever. No.
Sorry, I love you guys. I
No,
will
I know.
be around via email, always reachable. I will
Yes.
come visit, but I'm done.
Yes.
I'm gonna need a
Right.
chair for the symposium.
What'd you say, Diane?
I'm gonna need a chair for the symposium.
Oh yeah, I've already got it all set
Okay,
up for you. We'll have a comfortable chair for you.
I was just making sure. That's
Yes,
all.
no, it's noted for sure. So, all right, we won't keep you any longer. Have a great weekend, everybody, and stay safe, and we'll see you on the 2nd.
One quick question. So the due date for the papers, what is that?
It's in my
Fine.
courses.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's in my courses. It's in the Dropbox is already set up and everything's ready to go. I don't have it off the top of my head and I'm too afraid to give you the wrong date.
Okay, yeah, I'll take a look. And then
Okay.
24th is when the posters due. Yeah, sorry, I didn't notice the Dropbox for the slides until today, so I just submitted that in, but my bad.
Alrighty, no problem.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
All right, take care.
Bye.